It was supposed to be the trip of a lifetime. 4 friends, a remote camping spot deep in the woods, and a weekend away from the stress of city life. Jason, Mark, Emily, and Sarah had been planning this trip for months. They wanted complete isolation, no cell service, no distractions, just nature and adventure. Mark had heard about a hidden campsite from an old hiker he met at a bar one night. The hiker had warned him about the area, saying that people had gone missing there, but Mark brushed it off as drunken ramblings. People love to make up ghost stories about the woods, he had told the group. But think about it. Untouched land. No tourists and no rules. It'll be perfect. On a crisp Friday morning, they packed up their gear, loaded the truck, and drove 6 hours into the wilderness. The road grew narrower the deeper they went, the trees taller and denser blocking out more and more of the sunlight. By the time they reached the closest trailhead, there were no other cars, no signs of recent visitors. It was exactly what they wanted, or so they thought. The hike to the hidden campsite was grueling. The forest was eerily silent, apart from their own footsteps crunching against the fallen leaves. No birds, no rustling wildlife, just an unnatural quiet. Emily mentioned it first. "It's weird how quiet it is," she said, adjusting her backpack. "A forest this big should be full of sounds. Maybe it's just the season," Jason replied, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling creeping into his gut. After 4 hours of hiking, they finally arrived at the clearing. The campsite looked untouched, just as Mark had promised. The fire pit was still in good shape, and the surrounding trees gave them plenty of cover. As they set up camp, the wind picked up, carrying with it an unsettling whisper, low, almost like a voice. Sarah froze mid-motion. "Did you hear that?" she asked, glancing at the others. Mark laughed. "The wind, Sarah. It's just the wind." She wasn't convinced. As darkness fell, they sat around the fire exchanging stories and drinking beer. The stars above were endless, their glow barely cutting through the vast darkness of the forest. Then came the first sign of something wrong. Jason got up to grab more firewood. He wandered just a little too far from the fire's glow when he felt something watching him. It was a primal, gut-wrenching feeling like being stalked. He turned slowly, scanning the darkness, but saw nothing. Still, the sensation didn't go away. He walked back quickly, forcing a laugh. "Man, this place is messing with my head." As they settled in their tents, the forest remained deathly silent. Not a single cricket, not a single owl hoot. Just silence. Then, around 2 a.m., the noises began. A twig snapped. Then another. Sarah, half asleep, groggily sat up in her tent. "Jason." "Mark?" No answer. Another snap, closer this time. Then came the sound of breathing. Heavy, slow breathing, just outside her tent. Sarah's heart pounded. She reached for her flashlight, but just as she flicked it on, silence. She unzipped the tent flap just an inch, peeking outside. There was nothing. The fire had died down, casting eerie shadows. Then, just as she was about to zip it back, something darted between the trees. She gasped and scrambled backward. The others woke up to her screaming. Jason, Mark, and Emily rushed out of their tents. Sarah pointed toward the tree line, but whatever had been there was gone. "Are you sure it wasn't an animal?" Mark asked, gripping his flashlight. "That wasn't an animal," Sarah whispered. "It was standing, and it was watching me." Jason swept his flashlight over the trees. Then, they all heard it. A low chuckle. Not a human laugh. Not an animal sound. Something in between. The group stood frozen as the laugh echoed through the trees. Then, in the distance, they saw movement. Tall, unnatural, shifting just beyond the reach of their lights. That's when they realized they were not alone. Morning brought little relief. They awoke to find strange markings carved into the trees around their campsite. Symbols none of them recognized. Deep, jagged cuts forming a pattern that seemed to shift when they weren't looking directly at them. "Someone's messing with us," Jason muttered, rubbing his eyes, but his voice lacked conviction. Sarah ran her fingers over one of the carvings. "These weren't here yesterday. I swear!" Mark tried to laugh it off, but his hands trembled. "Let's just pack up and go." Emily nodded, shoving supplies into her backpack. "We shouldn't have come here." They hiked back as fast as they could, but the forest felt different. The trees were denser, the path unfamiliar, twisting in ways it hadn't before. Then came the sound again, the laughter. Closer this time. Jason gritted his teeth. "Move! Now!" They ran, branches whipping against their faces, feet pounding against the dirt. But no matter how fast they moved, the footsteps behind them kept pace. Then, Sarah tripped. Jason grabbed her, yanking her up, but not before she saw a towering figure, half hidden in the shadows, its face distorted, mouth stretched into an impossible grin. They burst into a clearing. But it wasn't the trailhead. It was the same campsite they had left behind. Emily gasped. No, we've been running straight. Mark turned in circles. How are we back here? Jason's hands were shaking. It won't let us leave. The laughter rose again, surrounding them. Now, the trees swayed, though there was no wind. The shadows between them twisted and moved. Then the fire pit lit itself. A roaring blaze with no fuel, no spark. A voice hissed through the flames. You're staying. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled, as if something beneath the earth was waking up. A shadow stretched from the fire, rising unnaturally tall, reaching toward them as the whispering voices grew louder. The flames in the fire pit roared, higher, casting monstrous shadows against the trees. The whispering voices merged into a chorus, echoing through the clearing, sending chills down their spines. We have to go now, Jason shouted, grabbing Sarah's wrist and yanking her toward the trees. But as they moved, the forest itself seemed to shift. The path they had followed before was gone. The trees loomed taller, their gnarled roots twisting like skeletal fingers, reaching out to trap them. Emily shrieked as something brushed against her arm, a cold, lifeless touch that sent her stumbling backward. She turned just in time to see a pale figure, its hollow eyes staring directly into hers from the dark. Figure's lips curled into a grin, and a breathy whisper escaped its mouth. You never should have come. Terror overtook them. They ran blindly into the trees, ignoring the branches scraping their skin, the roots tripping their feet. The laughter followed them, getting closer, multiplying. Sarah's heart pounded. We're going in circles. We're never getting out. Keep running, Mark yelled. We can't stop. Jason turned his head for just a moment, and that was when he saw it. The figure was gliding through the trees, its body moving unnaturally, as if it wasn't bound by the same laws of motion. Its grin was wider now, its arms stretching, fingers clawing toward them, and then it spoke again. One of you will stay. A realization dawned upon them. This place wanted something in return. Jason clenched his fists. No, we stick together. We make it out together. But as the entity grew closer, the air around them grew thick, suffocating. The pressure was unbearable. Emily fell to her knees, gasping for breath. I can't breathe! The forest seemed to close in around them. Mark looked at the others, his face filled with horror. I think it won't let us all leave. Silence fell between them, but the whispers in the wind continued. The entity stood just at the edge of the darkness, waiting. Mark took a deep breath. Go, get out of here, I'll hold it off. No, Sarah screamed. We stay together. There's no other way, Mark said. Go, before it changes its mind. Tears streamed down their faces, but they knew he was right. Jason hesitated for only a moment before grabbing Sarah and Emily, dragging them forward. Mark turned to face the entity. You want someone? You take me. Let them go. The creature's grin widened, and then everything went black. Jason, Sarah, and Emily ran and ran until suddenly they broke through the trees. The sky was just beginning to lighten, dawn creeping over the horizon. They collapsed onto the dirt road, gasping, shaking, unable to process what had just happened. Mark, Sarah sobbed, we have to go back for him. But when they turned, the trail they had come from was gone. Only an endless expanse of trees stood behind them. Jason clenched his fists. We'll find a way to bring him back. Emily wiped her tears and nodded. But deep down, they all knew. Mark was gone, and the forest had claimed him. Epilogue. The haunting truth. A week later, authorities launched a search party, but no trace of Mark was ever found. The clearing, the fire pit, everything was gone, as if it had never existed. Months later, Jason woke up in the middle of the night, sweat soaking his sheets. A sound had pulled him from sleep, a whisper. One of you will stay.